In April of 2024, the Fallout show officially released, effectively splitting a fandom that had already been fractured for years following the releases of Fallout 4 and Fallout 76. The number of lore changes, particularly regarding the West Coast, the very foundation of Fallout's identity, were immense. These changes have been stated to be canon, and the continuity of the world as we once knew it appears to have shifted. The Brotherhood of Steel, Ghouls, the NCR, the Legion, the Enclave, many pre-war companies, and possibly even New Vegas itself have all been drastically, seemingly altered, or worse, removed entirely. Now as Season 2 draws closer, recent leaks have only further divided the fan base, and only time will tell how deep these changes go. So instead of starting at the beginning, let's start at the end. The Vault-Tec conspiracy scene. This sequence raises a host of issues, is what I will say. The meeting includes several major players in the Fallout lore. Vault-Tec, represented by Bud and Barb, both introduced by the show. Robco, represented by none other than Robert House, more on him shortly here. West-Tec, represented by lead researcher Leon von Felden, that makes sense. RepCon, represented by CFO Julia Masters, that makes sense also. And Big Mountain, strangely represented by Frederick Sinclair. Again, we'll return to this shortly here. The meeting is convened to discuss the possible failure of peace talks between the US and China, with nuclear war on the horizon, obviously. With the hyper-capitalistic nature of these companies has always been established, and we've seen that in the game plenty of times, the show suggests something far more insidious. Vault-Tec and possibly its associates at this table intend to start the war themselves. Insert clip.
It's a fun idea. There's a lot of earning potential with the end of the world. But we're talking about making a significant investment based on a hypothetical. How can you guarantee results?
By dropping the bomb ourselves.
Essentially, the suggestion is that Vault-Tec caused the Great War, not China, as every Fallout game has led us to believe. And why have they done this? For money. That's right, for their capitalistic tendency. This is how they win the game of capitalism, quote unquote. Not only does this contradict decades of established lore, obviously, but it also fails to make any economic or logical sense whatsoever. Nuking the world would obviously destroy consumer markets, it would destroy supply chains, all their corporate assets. Companies like Robco and RepCon, they would be obliterating most of their own customer base here. Now, obviously, a lot of these companies too, they obviously have gotten military funding. RepCon, a lot of the plasma weaponry we see in the Fallout games comes from RepCon. Their propulsion systems were repurposed in a sense, right? They're still very much a capitalist consumer company. It doesn't serve them any purpose to blow up their own assets here. Yet, as the show tries to sell us this vision of corporate nihilism played to the absolute extreme, like it doesn't make any sense to me at all. It's not compelling, it's not clever, it's just dumb, personally. Now, Robert House. Robert House's presence at this meeting especially is a lot to take in for me. In Fallout New Vegas, House is portrayed as a visionary, a capitalist dictator, but with a genuine desire to preserve human civilization. He invested enormously into protecting Las Vegas from nuclear annihilation, shooting down many of the warheads himself. Obviously not all of them, he wasn't able to, but he did manage to shoot down a good lion's share of the warheads targeting the Vegas area. His entire philosophy was that war was inevitable. He figured it out that war was going to happen. He explains that in Fallout New Vegas, and Vegas has to survive. He knew it was going to happen. This was his baby. He was going to keep it pure, as much as he could at least. So if the show's portrayal is to be believed, he was either lying to the courier the entire time, or he underwent a massive retcon, and that's kind of how it is right now. Are we supposed to think that House was fine with the total destruction of the world as long as he could win the capitalist game afterwards and still have to compete with all these other companies after the fact? Like, I don't understand it personally. It undermines everything we learn about him in New Vegas, where he's actually nuanced, he's idealistic in his own cold and pragmatic way, but he's idealistic. This just shows him to be just another greedy executive in this scene. I'm not gonna lie, and I hope this isn't the case. I hope they fix this, or at least show something different with Fallout Season 2. But who knows, you know? Also on to Frederick Sinclair here. In lore, Sinclair is the creator of the Sierra Madre Casino, featured in the Dead Money DLC for New Vegas. And he was a tragic character. He was manipulated by Verikes and Dean Domino. His motivations were deeply personal, rooted in love, betrayal, and largely regret. But at the end of that, he is able to overcome those issues. That's what makes him such a compelling character. That's what makes Dead Money such a great DLC in my mind, is the story behind it. Obviously, the gameplay, you can talk about that all you want, right? But the storyline and the underlying tones of Dead Money are actually very, very good in my mind. In the show, however, Sinclair is turned into a generic corporate villain. He's cold, calculating. He's utterly devoid of his in-game depth, seemingly. He's just out there spitting like horrible experiments that they want to do to these people. And what's arguably even worse is that he's representing Big Mountain here. Like, he's representing Big MT. Like, yes, he used their tech in his buildings and to make the Sierra Madre in general. And I don't think he represented them at all in any official capacity. So basically, to me, this just seems like fan service is all it really is, but it doesn't even make sense as fan service. So yeah, there's Frederick Sinclair. The NCR. So the NCR is almost entirely absent from the show, appearing only in vague mentions and seemingly reimagined as cultists or raiders. This is a nation that by 2281 stretched from Oregon all the way to Baja, California, and was obviously expanding into the Mojave Wasteland as well at that time. By the time of the show in 2296, they're completely gone. Worse, the show states that the fall of Shady Sands happened in 2277. That's 4 years before Fallout New Vegas, which clearly depicts the NCR as a massive and functioning government at this time. Obviously, they do have their problems, but there is no indication to me that they were going to collapse within the next 4 years at that point. So unless we're dealing with a bizarre alteration of the timeline, this doesn't really make much sense. So if you look it up too, apparently the nuking of Shady Sands takes place in 2282, yet the fall is stated very clearly here in the show as 2277. So either they mean fall in like the long-term decline and the nuking straight up happened in 2282. I don't really know, but it's not really clear. But again, in 2281, in Fallout New Vegas, they do seem to still be quite the powerhouse. There's no indication of a fall there at that point. So yeah, this change kind of undermines New Vegas entirely. If New Vegas, if the NCR is gone just a year after the Courier's action, then the implication of the Courier's choices, especially siding with the House or the NCR, which are two of the usually considered canon endings, you know, they seem kind of meaningless now. The Legion isn't mentioned either. Did they also get wiped out by the same nukes? You know, the same factionalism, quote unquote, reason? The show doesn't say, and for some reason they've moved the location of Shady Sands from Central California all the way to Los Angeles, which contradicts its placement from basically all the games previously, which I don't really know why they felt the need to do that, but there it is. Yeah, Shady Sands is in Los Angeles now. So the nuking of Shady Sands is apparently triggered by Hank McLean, who was alerted by his wife, Rose, that water was being siphoned from nearby reservoirs, suggesting that civilization had returned to the surface. Rose tries to share this news, but Hank forbids her, prompting her to leave with her 2 children. Hank follows her to Shady Sands, retrieves his children, and Vault-Tec nukes the town. Yeah. Let that sink in for a moment. His motivation for nuking a functioning post-war civilization was to avoid factionalism. Again, reference the whole Vault-Tec blurb, we need to be the only ones. And yeah, he's a full believer of that. They apparently believe that no civilization could possibly reemerge in 200 years, despite the existence of Vault City, New Reno, the She, Necropolis, the Brotherhood of Steel, the Legion, and of course New Vegas. All these places existed and thrived post-war. You know, so either he left the vaults, just saw Shady Sands, thought that has to be the only one, and nuked them, or you know, they only targeted the NCR, and he just didn't hear about all these other massive fucking factions that arised on the wasteland in that time. So it's kind of strange, because you would definitely, I feel like a quick walk around, you know, Shady Sands, if you brought up the Legion at that time, they'd probably give you a whole blurb about what that's all about. So it just doesn't really make sense how the NCR are the only ones that got this treatment, especially considering that Vault-Tec clearly has functioning nukes still somewhere that are able to be launched after all this time. It's strange at best. We do see it happen in the games, but it's a little bit more nuanced than, you know, make a phone call and like boom, essentially, you know. It's a little bit more of a problem from what we've seen. So the last we see of Hank, he's walking towards New Vegas, and what role he'll play in season 2 remains to be seen. But yeah, the damage to the lore there is kind of already done. So yeah, NCR is gone. I guess let's move on. The Brotherhood of Steel. Now let's talk about the Brotherhood of Steel for a second here. This is perhaps one of the show's most egregious misinterpretations. To me personally, the Brotherhood of Steel has always varied depending on the region. On the East Coast, obviously, you had the idealistic and open Brotherhood of Steel under Elder Lyons, and this caused a major split and led to the formation of the Outcasts even. Elder Maxson later reversed many of these reforms in Fallout 4, which restored the Brotherhood to its more hardliner values. But on the West Coast, the Brotherhood remained isolationist, authoritarian, and rigidly obsessed with controlling technology. They didn't recruit outsiders unless it was a complete fucking balls to the walls emergency, and you had to be born into the order, right? It was very much a, you know, a members only thing, a family only thing. That's why their numbers were dwindling, and they refused to grow through recruitment. In the show, however, we see something else entirely. Initiates are branded like slaves. Civilians are burned out of their settlements. Outsiders are recruited without question, seemingly. The tactics are brutal and more cult-like than anything we've seen, even in Fallout 4, in my opinion. I never got the interpretation that the Brotherhood were a bunch of pseudo-religious fanatics when I played the games. I know they obviously respected technology in their own way, and they did have some kind of quasi-religious culture about them, but like, bro, they're straight up breaking out the incense to perform executions over here. Like, I did not get that sense from the Brotherhood at all from any chapter that we've seen, but maybe again I'm just incorrect on that. Maybe, you know, somebody can correct me, but yeah, that was not what I saw from them. And again, you have different chapters can represent different things, but kind of nuts. Yeah, this portrayal basically ignores 30 years of nuanced factional development. It also makes no sense at all that they would send out a small 2-person team, Paladin and a Knight, as if they're expendable scouts. And somehow also the Pridwin, their massive airship, it's now on the West Coast in 2296, just 9 years after it was seen above Boston in Fallout 4. Now, I suppose it's possible, theoretically, they get an airship across, you know, the entire continental US, but you're telling me no other faction took a shot at that thing in the time it took to cross the fucking country? Like, I just don't see it getting there in one piece, especially when you have Legion, you have multiple other factions that are just itching to get in there and blow that shit up. Also the Enclave, apparently. The Enclave are just around, again, the height of their fucking power since in the last 100 years, seemingly, so I don't know, man. It's just strange to me at best. The show treats the Brotherhood like a bunch of generic power-armored zealots and strips them of all their subtlety and reduces them to a blunt and villainous force. It's kind of sad to see, I'll be honest.
Save your speeches. We will take Hoover Dam and move forward and...
This was just a small list of some of the more major gripes I had with the show. I could go on about minor things like my dislike for certain characters, but it doesn't really matter when compared with the lore changes so massive that the timeline no longer makes any sense. Bethesda claims Shady Sands was destroyed in 2282. The show very clearly states that a fall happened in 2277, so what exactly that means, I just wish they would clear up just a little bit more, because then we would be knowing, at least if we're looking at a full retcon of New Vegas, and we can just be pushing that game out of our heads entirely, you know, like we all definitely want to do. In the end, I just don't understand why they needed to retcon the first, I guess, 3 games and then New Vegas so much. It just doesn't really seem necessary to me. The lore was fine, there was nothing wrong with it. I don't know why they had to do a 15-year time skip to achieve what they were trying to achieve for this, but there you have it. It's Bethesda's franchise now, and very, very clearly, capitalism doesn't change.